Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time Summer Shorts. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Dee, and for our summer series, we are recapping single episode stories.
Here on this episode, we are going to discuss an episode of Casefile called Mark and John. This episode came out in December of 2018. It is episode 104 of Casefile.
If you haven't listened yet, take a deep breath. You'll find a link to Casefile in our show notes. Then join us here for our recap discussion.
All right, Dee, so I brought this to us. I brought this to our worlds.
You did, Jeff. You did that to us.
So I tried to do like a couple bullet summary of what happens here, and it kind of went awry because basically this is my summary of the story. There's a teenage boy named Mark. It's 2003. He joins an online chat room. He's looking to meet girls. He's in Manchester, England. It gets so bad from there. He meets this girl named Rachel, and then her stepbrother, John. And then there's a bunch of other people who pop in, including this bully named Kevin, who threatens to murder Rachel. And then he apparently does. There's Lindsay, who's a junior MI6 agent. Didn't know that was a thing. And then there's Janet, who's an adult, like a senior MI6 agent. Even though she's in her 40s, she's still very sexy.
That was the thing I was going to bring to you. Someone put up on Reddit being like, a Casefile quote of the year. Even though she was in her 40s and married, she specified that she was still very sexy. This person said, I let out a massive hat on public transport at that part.
That was the highlight of the episode.
Between that and the code word being 66969.
669. Yeah, that was another
I was
highlight.
like,
You're right.
how are we not clear that this is a teenage boy? But anyway, sorry.
Anyway, yeah, it gets dark from there. We can't say, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but basically, Mark ends up stabbing John in an alleyway outside of Manchester. And then it turns out that John set it all up. John was all those other people, basically just pretending with Mark. And I don't know. Where do we start talking about this? This was rough. This was hard to listen to.
It was so hard to listen to. I feel like maybe, something that I was thinking of while listening to this story, and something that I've read throughout some comments about this episode in particular, was I feel like the first port of call is like, how could Mark be so gullible to think all these people are there, like that all these people are who they say they are, that like Rachel actually does get murdered, like his girlfriend at the time like gets murdered, right, even though he's never actually seen her like on a live cam, that she gets murdered, and that he's blamed for it, and like he never says it to anyone except for John. And then all of this like secret agent stuff starts to happen, and people are like, I can understand people saying like, how could you be so gullible? But then that's as like we're adults, we know not to be that naive. Yeah. But you think back to being a teenager, you think back to like MSN was like huge when I was a teenager.
I was going to ask you about that because this is 2003. You were I think the same age as Mark, right?
I would have been 15.
Yeah, he was 16. So basically the same age.
Yeah.
So were you using these kinds of chat rooms? Like you were big into this?
Yeah, I wasn't in chat rooms, but I was in MSN Messenger, but I actually don't remember ever there being like specific chat rooms that you went into to speak to different people. So I don't know whether that was just... I don't remember that kind of side to it, but I remember being on MSN, like talking to friends. Yeah. Which is different.
Like real friends you had in real life.
Real friends that I had in real life. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't get recruited into becoming a secret agent?
No, but I do know that when I was in school, a friend of mine was briefly seeing someone. So they were like dating, and he told her that he was like a secret agent who was working for someone. Like, I know that happened. Like, that was a thing that happened. And like, she was like, obviously that's like, she didn't believe it. She was like, whatever.
Yeah. When you say like how could he be so gullible, or how could he, I feel like there's two things going on here. One, like this was early days of the internet and kind of access to the internet, and there were people who really sort of took advantage of that power, that being able to be anonymous, being able to be creative as they wanted to. Like I feel like John was incredibly creative and detail oriented. And then there's also just the idea of a 16-year-old boy who is lonely and just wants to believe.
I know. Like, even if you think of like there's so many I feel like books, like series of books out there, or like movies where it's like a teenager is recruited, and like that, it's kind of that fantasy of like your boring life is more whatever. And I saw a number of people on Reddit saying, you know, I listen to this now as a 37-year-old and I think, how could you be so gullible? But then I put myself back in as a high school freshman. This is a review I'm reading right now, using AOL and IRC chat room, which I have no idea what that is, wanting so desperately to find someone with whom I had a connection, and I realized the real possibility of this. And it is crazy how far it ended up going here, but I think it's not beyond the realms of possibility. And I think, given the sentencing that came out of it, that shows like that both of them were just, it was just so dark. It was so dark. But the things that Mark did, I feel so sorry for him.
Yeah, there were so many times where I was listening to this where I just was sort of like in my head, just like screaming at Mark, just like, just stop, man. Like, just go outside, go, like, get away from this. Like this, and it definitely seems like one of those things where it's like you believe a little lie, and the lie gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then by you start doing things like stabbing your best friend. I do want to say, I feel like the storytelling in this podcast laid it out really well. I thought it was engaging. I was definitely really angry at it while listening to it, but I wasn't really like questioning what was happening. I wasn't, like I was able to follow along really well. I was able to kind of stay engrossed in the story. It just, I don't know. It was just, it's funny. I was listening to this while I was washing our car, and when I had to turn the hose on and I knew I wouldn't be able to hear a bit, I was like, I got to pause it, because I don't want to miss those like 20 seconds of filling a bucket with water. That is like, to me, that's where like, I don't want to miss any bit of it. I don't want like something important's going to happen. And something important I feel like was happening throughout this. There's just, or one like crazy thing that topped the last crazy thing. Like when the MI6 agents came in, I actually stopped and went back. It's like, wait, the Queen wants to get this safe, and the only person who has the code is John, is this young boy, and if he does this, he'll get sexual favors from Janet, maybe. It's so convoluted and bizarre. Like it's so crazy. It's so outlandish. Like before we listened to this, the one of the reasons I picked this episode was because that's what people said. They said it was one of the like wildest episodes, and this is one of the wilder stories I think we've done, just in terms of just how bonkers it is on one level.
Yeah.
What do you think? You mentioned the punishment they got. So neither one of them was sentenced to prison. They basically got a version of probation. They weren't allowed to contact each other, and they were banned from using the internet or chat rooms or some version of that. I feel like they both committed very different crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So John's crime was incitement to murder himself, which no one had ever been charged with before. And Mark...
I feel like John's crime should have been more than that, honestly.
Yeah, that's what I was asking you. Like, do you feel like that was fair, or do you feel like it was too light?
Because
you think John's was too light?
Yeah, I feel like, to me, it feels like I understood the leniency behind the sentences, because I think John was obviously suffering so deeply at that time, so I get it. But even if there was no jail time, he coerced someone into sexual acts.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
multiple times with presumably multiple people, although it was all the same person.
Yeah, but at least once when it was Mark solo, but once on John himself.
Oh, like in real life,
And
yes, but also
yeah,
on camera.
yes. And that seems to have not been brought up. And I feel like that is huge. That is one big, huge thing. And the other thing is having the ability to convince someone to murder someone, even if that someone is yourself. Like plotting to do that in such a convoluted way. And they kept saying that John's, like, he had done it in such, like, he was a way, what was the, like, genius kept being thrown around, I think they were saying in the courtroom.
Yeah.
That whole idea behind that, I just feel like, honestly, I feel like now, right now, if both Mark and John are sitting in a moment of quiet with themselves and they look back, I feel like Mark is the one who's going to struggle more with this entire episode than John will. And I don't
Oh,
think
yeah.
that that's fair in a way, because I understand that Mark did those things, but it just feels like that John is kind of like, oh, you were trying to hurt yourself, kind of feels like what happened with John's sentence. But he didn't just hurt himself. And
Yeah.
I don't know, does that sound really harsh? Do you know what I'm getting at? Like, he there was a lot that he did that was incredibly wrong to Mark. And I understand that he was going through a lot himself, but I feel like what didn't seem to play in at all in the sentencing was what he did to Mark. Even though I know it's so bonkers because Mark was the one who tried to kill John. But it's, so maybe
Yeah.
it's bonkers to say it. But do you know what I mean? It feels like that part was just like, well, you did try and kill him, so let's just forget about the fact that he forced you into a sex act multiple times.
I think I hear what you're saying, and I think I agree, because I do think I agree that John was clearly suffering. John clearly had, like, I have a lot of empathy for John.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
what he did was not just one crime. It seems like it was many crimes, and the lasting damage on Mark. I feel like that's what you're saying. Like, the lasting damage on Mark isn't just about the stabbing. Yeah, it's about the sex acts. It's about the whole thing. It's about, like,
Yeah,
what kind of trust issues is Mark going to have in the rest of his life?
it's hard to.
One thing I do want to say about this is that you made me think of. So first of all, I hadn't thought about the connection to, like, what happens in, like, books that you're reading at this age, but, like, even older books, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe or something, where, like, there's so many books where young people, teenagers or kids, are sort of fed this idea of you're destined for something greater and magical and so much bigger than your ordinary lives. And so, like, the propensity to believe that is right there. It's definitely there. But the other thing I wanted to mention was that the other literary reference that I thought of was, you know how when this probably happens with a lot of things, but the thing that I always think of is when high school students are reading Romeo and Juliet, and they're like, there's no way that these two people would have this, like, so intense relationship that they would commit suicide and like be over like they'd fall so hard in love and this would happen so quickly. And yeah, it's a play and it's heightened realism, but this is real life, and this happened over a relatively short period, and it was, I think, similarly sort of, like, fantastically intense. And I feel like this is one of those examples of, yeah, when you're a teenager, things are just really, really intense, and you feel things really, really deeply. And sometimes that leads you to do things that are very, very dumb or reckless or dangerous. And, like, I feel like this is sort of a real life example of something that proves that some of that stuff does happen.
Mm.
And people do behave in ways that are so seemingly irrational. Like the idea that he would just believe that he was being recruited by MI6 like this. Yeah, I kind of see it. Like I kind of get it.
I mean, it's like one of the first type of like social media scams, isn't it? Like it happens now so often with catfishing and all that. Yeah. So
let me ask you, I had a couple other questions for you.
go for it.
They made this into a play, an opera, and a movie. Would you watch any of those?
No, I actually have a little bit of hatred for that.
Explain.
Hatred's a bit strong. I have strong feelings towards that because these are two teenage boys. I actually kind of have strong feelings to the fact that this was made into a podcast. I kind of have a little bit of negative vibes for the fact that we're actually talking about it because I feel like for Mark and John, they were teenagers when they did this. And can you imagine like the worst thing you did as a teenager? And the thing that you've worked through and you've tried to move past being constantly brought up. The worst thing you ever did, like the worst situation you were ever in, been made into a play and been made into a book and been made into whatever. And then it all passes. And then podcasts become a thing. And then it being made into a podcast. Not only that, but then it being made into a podcast that's like a well-known podcast series, but it's known as one of the best episodes of that podcast series.
It's a really good point.
And I think my issue is more because they were teenagers when it happened and because they're both victims and they were both clearly hurting, that it just feels like they are living, I don't know, I just like, teenagehood's the worst. It's the worst. And the cringe that you go through at the time is the worst. And when you think back of some of the worst things you did and you're like, oh my God, I can't even cope. But to think about that amplified and brought back up so often, it just feels like, ugh.
I hear what you're saying. I'm glad you said it. I do want to acknowledge that what you're saying is very similar to what I said when you said true crime. I love true crime. And I know you're talking about this being teenagers, and that is a key difference.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like one of the things I said, a year and a half ago, was, feels kind of gross to be making entertainment out of these people's real lives and the worst things that happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are. Now I'm bringing this story to you.
Hold on. Just to be clear for everyone listening, I didn't bring the idea of a podcast to Jeff. He brought the idea of a podcast to me. So when we had the conversation about true crime, it was not about us entering this zone of podcasting. It was about true crime as a genre of podcasting. And I said, I understand what you're saying, but there is space for it.
And that was the last episode of So Much Crime. So Much Fun. Thanks for listening.
We will never return.
I had one more question for you.
The shortest goodbye. Go on.
We talked in the preview about how this host is anonymous, and also how this host has gotten, some of the feedback that I read was that it's become more robotic and sort of like AI-like in more recent episodes. This is a very old episode where there was a little bit more sort of, people perceived it as having more personality. What did you think of the host?
I mean, there really wasn't any personality. Was that not the point?
Yeah, I wanted there to be some.
Oh, really?
Kind of.
That's interesting.
I mean, it could have gone wrong. It could have been a problem.
Really?
I thought that some of the things that happened were presented with such dryness that it was almost like dryness to the point of being sarcastic.
Okay.
Like some of the things we were talking about at the beginning, like the 6969 thing, or like the still very sexy line from Janet. Like I thought some of the more kind of outlandish things, when they are presented by the host with no inflection, no commentary, and that's maybe my projection onto it. But
okay.
I almost like wanted the host to well, let me just say, I wanted the host to maybe.
So do you want to finish a thought or a sentence? I don't know how I feel about this.
I wanted the host to maybe add some empathy, some context, and that wasn't there. This was a more straight telling of fact.
Okay.
You disagree?
I hear you. I hear what you're saying. And I understand that. The name of this podcast is Casefile. Casefile being like a collection of documents and records related to a specific legal case or investigation. That's all it is. I think the entire premise is there is nothing else. There is no discussion. There is no context. These are the files belonging to the case.
Okay.
That's my interpretation of the show. And that's probably why it stands out as a different type. Now, I've never listened to a different episode, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is not like standard, but from my take, it's like this is how they do it.
Yeah.
This is
well,
how they do it. Sorry.
Okay, Montel Jordan. This is a good point to remind our listeners, if you've listened to Casefile, if you have other episodes that you think we should listen to, let us know. Leave a comment on this episode or send us an email or let us know on Instagram, wherever you are. Give us a shout out and tell us or what you think of this. If you listen, it seems like this is one of the most popular episodes of Casefile. So I'm curious what other people think. Would you, Dee, listen to more episodes of this?
Yeah, I think I would. I think I want to listen to the more robotic ones and see if I think it's AI.
I listened to about 5 minutes of one, and I heard what people were saying, and I did not enjoy it. And that's part of why I dug deeper for an older one.
Interesting.
30 years ago, in a small Bay Area town, a killer kidnapped 3 men and dumped their bodies in a secluded valley just off Interstate 80. But then, just as quickly as the killings began, they suddenly stopped. The men and their murder were quickly forgotten, overshadowed by other notorious serial killers prowling the same Bay Area roads. In this season of Crime Adjacent, host and serial killer survivor Chase Patrick returns home to uncover what really happened in Ridgewood and to answer the question once and for all: how could the most prolific serial murderer in American history slip under the radar for so long? Crime Adjacent is the never-ending true crime story told weekly. Listen to Crime Adjacent wherever you listen to podcasts.
Jeff, I went to the beach today and had a picnic. And it's so nice because my kids are at this beautiful age where I can sit on the beach and maybe like chill, and they like play in the sand. I don't have to be like, holding their hands. No, I was just sitting on my chair, like relaxing.
What are you going to do with all that extra time?
Well, do you know what I did today? Was I made my husband go to patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time, because he didn't realize that actually if he went there, he would get longer time machines, some early release episodes, bonus content, and obviously the best part, which is the outtakes. And he'd also be able to support our show, which sometimes, people forget that they can do that.
That's awesome. What a great use of that time on the beach. I'm sure it made his beach day so much better.
Oh, filled his day with joy.
That's patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time. All right, we're coming back on Thursday with a whole new preview and another trip in the time machine.
We'll introduce a crime and get ready to listen to the story before coming back with a recap like this one to discuss.
That's the next So Much Crime.
So little time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.